Why was the silence so heavy that morning? Like the air itself already knew what was coming. Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance stood by the lead vehicle, boots planted in the dust of a forgotten road cutting through the Carpathian Ridge. To anyone else, it was a routine NATO patrol, a joint sweep through a valley more known for its ghosts than its landmarks. But to her, the quiet was wrong. It was too still, too clean, the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace but preparation. She leaned her weight against the armored MRAP, watching the horizon blur into jagged mountains. The sunlight hit the metal like it was testing it for weakness. Everything out here looked like it was waiting for something: the hills, the rusted fences, even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Chief Mason appeared beside her, his square jaw and calm eyes reflecting years of battles fought without ever needing to brag about them. He handed her a canteen wordlessly, his kind of conversation. Tessa didn't drink. Her gaze never left the ridge. "Too quiet," she murmured. Mason gave a small shrug. "You're never happy, Commander. Last time you complained the wind was too loud." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that barely touched her lips. "Yeah, and that convoy never came home." He didn't laugh, just looked at her the way only someone who'd watched her almost die before could. She earned that instinct. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Out here, life didn't warn you twice. Behind them, the convoy stretched like a metal spine down the broken road: 8 SEALs, 3 Polish GROM operators, and a handful of contractors hired for logistics support. Local faces, foreign accents, mismatched patches. Some smoked, some joked, some checked gear they'd probably never use. But not Tessa. She was still, scanning every movement, every sound that didn't belong. A man in contractor fatigues approached, sleeves rolled, forearms inked with a lion's head wrapped in Cyrillic lettering. "Ma'am, drones are airborne," he reported. "Full satellite uplink." Tessa turned her head slowly. "Name?" "Reed." "You've run this route before." "Twice, smooth both times." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny, that's not what Intel said." Reed's grin didn't falter. "Then maybe Intel was wrong." "Maybe, or maybe you are." She didn't say it. Just let the silence stretch until he shifted his weight and looked away. When Mason joined her again, he muttered under his breath, "You always this paranoid." Tessa's answer came quiet, almost thoughtful. 9 Americans got ambushed last month on a friendly route. You tell me what normal looks like after that. The wind shifted. Dry grass rubbed against old wire fencing. No birds, no movement. Even the dust seemed to hesitate before rising. She tapped the digital map strapped to her wrist. "This stretch is supposed to be IED country," she said. "2 detonations last week." "Maybe someone cleared it." Her tone stayed flat. "Yeah, but who?" She didn't get an answer, only the soft static of the radio check. The convoy was ready to move. Orders were orders. You could smell doubt all you wanted, but you still had to drive straight into it. "Mount up," she said. Engines ignited one by one, a deep mechanical growl that rolled across the ridge like thunder. The soldiers took their positions, eyes hidden behind goggles and helmets, faces unreadable. Tessa climbed into the lead MRAP, settling into the passenger seat beside Mason. Her rifle rested across her lap, her hand tapping the dash. Not nerves, calibration. Always rhythm, always focus. The road narrowed as they rolled forward. The convoy spread thin, too thin, but there wasn't space to bunch up. Old stone walls lined the track like teeth. "Convoy 1, status green," Mason called over comms. "Copy, status green," came the reply from the rear vehicle. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Just the hum of engines and the sound of their own breathing inside armored helmets. Time slowed into something that didn't feel like time anymore. The kind of crawl where seconds have weight. Tessa's eyes traced the horizon again. Her instincts whispered a soundless warning. Something wasn't aligning. The ridgeline above looked too deliberate, the slope too smooth, like someone had combed the earth. "Mason," she said quietly. "Yeah. If this goes loud, we don't wait for permission." He didn't argue, just nodded once. "Copy that." And then it happened. The world broke open in light and fire. The lead vehicle ahead vanished, 1 second solid steel, the next, a blossom of flame and black smoke. The blast wave punched their MRAP sideways, throwing Tessa against the seat hard enough to crack her spine. The windshield fractured into 1,000 splinters. IED contact front," Mason's voice roared. Gunfire ripped through the silence, precise, synchronized, not random bursts. Whoever they were, they knew the terrain, knew their target. Tessa's hands were already moving before thought caught up. She grabbed the radio, barking orders. "Ambush left ridge, get eyes up, suppression fire now." The 50 caliber gun mounted above roared to life, muzzle flashes strobing the rocks, brass shells raining around them. The smell of cordite filled the air. "Contractors," she yelled, "eyes on." Through the cracked windshield, she saw them, 3 of them backing away instead of firing. One dropped his rifle entirely. Another shouted into a handset that didn't look standard issue. "Mason, they're pulling back." He swung the turret, raking fire across the ridge. "Copy, stay low." But it was chaos. The convoy was pinned, vehicles smoking, men shouting, dirt spitting up around them like the earth itself had turned against them. Tessa kicked open the door, dropped into the dust, and dragged herself behind the wheel well. "Vickers!" she shouted. Petty Officer Vickers was sprawled near the front tire, his thigh soaked in blood. She crawled toward him under a hail of bullets, grabbed his collar, and pulled him back with strength she didn't know she still had. "Stay with me," she said, pressing gauze against the wound, her gloves turning red. Then one sound cut through everything. A single rifle crack, clean, cold. The impact slammed into her chest like a hammer. Air fled her lungs. She fell back, the world folding inward. For a heartbeat, she saw only the fractured blue sky through the haze of smoke. Mason's voice burst through comms, jagged and desperate. "Commander down, commander down." The rest was sound and shadow, fire from both ridges, the rumble of collapsing steel, the laughter of men who thought the job was done. And then nothing. It's strange what you notice when you're dying. The pulse behind your ribs, the taste of metal in your mouth, the way time goes soft. Tessa felt it all, the broken ribs, the stabbing pain with every attempt to breathe. Her armor had stopped the round barely, but it had cracked the trauma plate, shattered bone, and punctured a lung. She could feel blood pooling under the vest, warm, sticky. Her fingers twitched, clawing dirt. She wasn't gone, not yet. "Don't listen to the body." Her father's voice again, steady as ever. The old drown-proofing instructor who used to hold her underwater until panic turned to control. "The body lies," he'd told her once. "The will decides." Her chest convulsed. Air came in wet and uneven. "Mason," she tried to whisper, but the radio was gone. The world dimmed at the edges. Footsteps. They were close. She slowed her breathing, chest barely rising. Someone kicked gravel near her head. Voices. "Primary target neutralized," a man said flatly. "Copy that, collect her gear. We'll stage the bodies after." Fingers pulled at her vest straps, rolling her slightly. Pain exploded through her side, enough to make her see white. "Not yet, don't move." Another voice, familiar this time. Smooth, confident, "Read." "You already got the pictures," someone said. "What more do you need?" "She might have seen something," Reed answered. "We can't risk it." The words hit harder than the bullet. This wasn't just an ambush. This was a cleanup. Intel leaks, trafficking routes, internal betrayal. The convoy had been bait and she'd walked them straight into it. They thought she was gone. Good. Let them think that. As they dragged her toward the burned-out farmhouse, her body left a trail of blood in the dust. She counted the steps, 7 downhill, turn right, then gravel. cataloging, not feeling. "She's lighter than I expected," one man muttered. "How the hell did this one lead a team?" "Special forces types are overrated," another said with a sneer. "They break like anyone else, especially the women." Tessa's jaw clenched, but her eyes stayed closed. Her heart still beat, just slower, heavier, enough to remind her she was still here. They dumped her inside the ruined house, walls cracked, roof half gone, air thick with old smoke. "Let her bleed out," a voice ordered. "We'll stage the photos when she's gone." A camera clicked, plastic, digital, disposable. "Everyone accepts a chest wound," someone said. "Nobody survives that." Except she did. She waited until their voices faded, then opened one eye, just a slit. Reed's voice came from the doorway. "Check her pockets, she had files." "No body cam," another replied. "She ditched it," Reed muttered. "Then we make it look like the locals did this. Blame the militia, same playbook." A pause. She was the only one carrying the Balkan intel. And that's when the last piece fell into place. They hadn't just wanted her dead, they wanted her erased. Every report, every recording, every file tied to the investigation of an arms deal gone sideways, gone with her. Her throat tightened, not from fear, from rage. When Reed knelt beside her, she could smell the nicotine on his jacket. "Bulletproof isn't the same as heartproof," he said quietly. "Too bad. You look like someone who could survive anything." Then he stood, burned the place. When their boots faded into the distance, Tessa Vance exhaled for real. It came out like glass scraping against her ribs. She stared up through the broken rafters, watching sunlight spill through in fractured beams. Her body wanted to quit, but her mind, no. She was still breathing, still fighting, still deciding. And as long as her heart beat, the mission wasn't over. How long had it been since they left her there? 10 minutes, 30, an hour. Time didn't exist in pain. It came in flashes, like memory fragments floating in dark water. The world was half shadow, half blur. Her chest burned every time she tried to breathe, but she wasn't dead. That counted for something. Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance pressed her palm flat against the floorboards. They were rough, splintered, soaked with dust and her blood. The smell of iron mixed with old smoke and rot, the scent of endings. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. She rolled slightly to her side, a motion so small yet violent in its agony. Broken ribs shifted, a sharp blade of pain slicing through her chest. She clenched her teeth until her jaw trembled. The voice of her old instructor came back from another life, cold water, freezing dawn, a swim too long for anyone sane. "Your body screams first. Ignore it. Find the rhythm underneath." Her rhythm now was survival, one breath, one movement, one decision at a time. Through a gap in the broken wall, she could see sunlight sliding across the valley. It was afternoon, which meant she'd been down for hours. Long enough for them to believe she was gone. Long enough for her to turn that belief into a weapon. She shifted again, biting back a scream. Every movement was its own war. Her vest was cracked, ceramic plate split like a spiderweb. She unbuckled it slowly, the metal groaning under her grip. Blood had pooled beneath it, thick, dark, sticky, the color of something ancient. When it came free, she almost passed out from the shock of air hitting the wound. Her breathing hitched, shallow, broken, but her hands still worked, trembling, weak but steady enough. She pushed the vest aside and searched the ground around her. Debris, splintered wood, metal shards. Her fingers brushed something cold, the edge of a rifle, unloaded. "God bless your laziness," she whispered, dragging it closer. The magazine pouch was still latched. She popped it open, one full mag untouched. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. The voices outside grew faint. Laughter, then engine noise. They were leaving. She listened carefully, the tone, the direction, the distance. Old habits kicking in. Even on her knees, she was still a tactician. She waited until silence took the valley again. Only then did she move. Slowly she crawled toward the doorway, her hand leaving streaks of blood on the dusty floor. Each inch was deliberate, each breath measured. When her vision swam, she stopped, grounded herself, and continued. The farmhouse was half-burned, roof gone, walls cracked open to the sky. The skeleton of a home turned into a tomb. They'd chosen it for irony. She'd make sure it became theirs instead. By the time she reached the window, the pain had blurred into something else: focus. Pain was information. Pain told her what still worked. She slumped against the frame, pulled the rifle across her lap, and checked the chamber again. Still empty. She loaded the mag, racked it once, and took a long breath through her teeth. Her mind began building the next step before her body caught up. It always had. If they'd left her alive, they'd come back. Not out of carelessness, out of procedure. She'd heard Reed's voice. Stage the photos when she's gone. Which meant there was a window between now and then, time enough for her to prepare. Her left hand trembled as she reached into the dead man's belt pack beside her. A medkit, half empty but usable. Morphine syringe still intact. She didn't hesitate. The needle slid into her thigh, a hiss of numbness racing through her veins. It wasn't relief, just clarity. She taped her ribs tight with combat gauze, one wrap at a time. It hurt worse than the wound itself, but it gave her structure. "You move anyway," she muttered under her breath, echoing the mantra that had kept her alive through drown-proofing, through sear, through every training designed to break a person before the enemy ever could. Her mind sharpened as the fog lifted. She wasn't a victim lying in ruins. She was a SEAL in hostile territory with one objective: survive long enough to flip the script. She scanned the room again, every corner, every exit, every possible line of fire. The structure was weak but not useless. She could use that. The floorboards sagged under weight, good for traps. The door hung by a single hinge, perfect for rigging. And upstairs, if the shattered beams could hold, a sniper nest. All she needed now was time. She gathered everything she could from the corpses they'd left behind. 2 rifles, 3 loaded mags, a sidearm, a combat knife, a flashbang with a half-bent pin, and a small comms radio still tuned to their frequency. She crouched low against the wall and pressed the button. Static. Then a clipped voice cut through. "Confirm kill. No photos received." A pause. "You're running out of time." Another voice, nervous. Team 3 went dark. No visual on target body. "She's dead," someone snapped. "Shot through the heart, finish cleanup, burn everything." Tessa's lips curved. Not a smile, just a line of understanding. They still believed she was gone. She keyed the mic, voice low, cold, steady. "This is Vance. You shot me in the chest. You should have aimed higher." 5 seconds of silence followed. Then chaos. "She's alive. How is she alive?" "Get eyes on the farmhouse. Move." "Perfect." She dropped the radio, grabbed a broken beam, and began building her first trap. The front door was easiest. She tied the beam to a grenade pin using paracord, old trick, quick setup. Anyone forcing the door would trigger the blast chest high. Next, the stairs, a tripwire made from a shoelace and that bent flashbang tucked inside a tin can. Crude but effective. It'd blind anyone who tried to rush in. Then she crawled upstairs, if the broken loft could be called that, and found a spot between 2 fallen beams. A gap wide enough for a prone firing position. She steadied her rifle on a piece of old furniture, used a broken shutter as a brace. Her body was screaming now, but her mind was calm, still, purpose-driven. Through the scope, she saw the road leading up to the farmhouse. Empty for now. The sky turning copper at the edges, dusk bleeding in. Shadows stretching long across the dirt. Her finger traced the trigger lightly, not to shoot, but to remember the rhythm. Pain, breath, focus. The world narrowed to that line of sight. She heard them before she saw them, boots on gravel, whispers carried by wind. A squad moving in low, confident, thinking this was cleanup duty. Her voice in her head was calm, detached. 3 targets minimum. 4, maybe 5. The first silhouette appeared at the edge of her scope, crouched, knife drawn, silent. She waited until he reached the window frame, until his boot lifted just off the ground. Then she pulled the trigger. The sound cracked through the air, echoing down the valley. One clean headshot. The body dropped without a word. The second came through the door. Her trap detonated, a burst of fire and wood splinters. The explosion ripped half the entrance apart, sending another man crashing into the wall. Silence, then panic. Team 4, report. What the hell happened? Tessa picked up the fallen radio and pressed the button again. Down 2. Request immediate reinforcements. Another voice hissed, "Who is this?" She smiled faintly. "You know who." Gunfire erupted outside. Blind fire. Fear fire. The kind of shooting done by people who realize they're not hunting a ghost, they're being hunted by one. She moved quickly, crawling across the broken floorboards to a new position. Every breath was agony. Every step sent fire through her ribs. But she was alive. Alive enough to fight. Outside, a voice barked through a loudspeaker. "Lieutenant Vance, you're wounded and surrounded. No escape." She said nothing. Instead, she pulled a flare from her vest, lit it, and tossed it through the shattered window. The valley glowed red, the color of warning. Through the crimson haze, a shadow flanked right. She caught it in the scope and fired once. The figure dropped instantly. A scream followed. Someone ran. She didn't chase. Fear was faster. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the flare. The farmhouse glowed like an altar. The wind carried the smell of cordite, wood smoke, and blood. Her breath came ragged. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She was no longer the hunted. She was the consequence. Then a single, clean gunshot split the night. The bullet hit the beam inches above her head, spraying splinters. She froze. That wasn't panic fire. That was precision. She crawled lower, eyes narrowing. The shooter was patient, trained, not one of the contractors. She picked up the enemy radio again, switched channels. A calm voice came through, deliberate and unhurried. "You're clever," it said. The fake death, the traps, the calm voice. I've seen it before. She stayed silent. "I don't rush," the voice continued. "I don't shout, and I don't miss twice." Her lips parted slightly. The accent was Finnish, the tone professional. Sniper, she thought, professional grade. She keyed the mic. "Then you know what happens when 2 professionals meet." A chuckle drifted back. "I've heard stories about you. Iron Heart, they call you. Let's see if it's true." Her pulse steadied. She adjusted her grip, slid to a lower corner of the loft, using the hole in the roof to scan the ridge. 200 meters out, movement between 2 pine trees. A faint glint of glass. "There you are." He had the advantage, elevation, visibility, control. But arrogance was a weapon too. She whispered to herself, "Let's see what happens when neither of us misses." She crawled out through a side hole in the wall, keeping her silhouette low. The cold dirt bit into her palms as she moved along the collapsed fencing. Every inch closer closed the distance between hunter and hunted. 50 meters, 30, 10. She could hear his breath through the wind, calm, steady, professional. He exhaled to take the shot, and that's when she rose from the slope like smoke. Her rifle already sighted. One shot, center mass. The impact hit him hard enough to drop his scope. He stumbled back, reaching for his sidearm. Her second shot took his leg. He fell, gasping. Tessa approached slowly, rifle steady despite the tremor in her hands. He looked up at her, disbelief painted across his face. "How?" She tilted her head. "I moved." He tried to grin through the blood. "You're not supposed to be alive." She stared down at him, eyes cold. "That's the problem with shooting someone in the chest." A pause, a breath. "You assume you hit the heart." Then she pulled the trigger. The forest went quiet again. Only her breathing remained shallow, steady, defiant. What does victory even feel like when you've lost everything that made you human? The forest was quiet again, too quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after a kill, not peace, just the absence of noise. Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance stood over the sniper's body, her rifle still raised, the smell of gunpowder lingering like a ghost that refused to leave. The man's blood had already begun to seep into the dirt, a dark, widening stain. She stared at him for a long time, not because she needed to confirm the kill, but because she wanted to understand something she couldn't name. He'd been good, too good, which meant he hadn't just been hired muscle. Someone sent him, someone with money, reach, and a reason to make sure she never told her story. Her chest ached with every breath. The bandages she'd wrapped hours ago were soaked through again. Her heartbeat thudded painfully under the cracked ceramic plate, still alive, still moving, still deciding. That was the part they'd never understand. Survival isn't about wanting to live. It's about refusing to die. She knelt beside the sniper's corpse, searching through his pockets. Her fingers found what she needed, a comms earpiece, encrypted, tuned to a private frequency. She slid it into her ear, listened. Static, then a voice, calm, commanding, "Victor, report." She didn't answer, just waited. "Victor, status. Do you have visual confirmation?" The tone was cold, corporate, not military. She recognized that kind of detachment, mercenary control, layers between the killers and the ones who paid them. Tessa looked at the body. His equipment was high-end, civilian-grade precision but custom-built. Contractors with NATO patches didn't carry this. Whoever orchestrated this wasn't just erasing her. They were cleaning the ledger. She pressed the transmit button, voice low, measured, and hauntingly calm. "He's down, so are you." Silence, then chaos on the line, voices overlapping. "Who is this? Victor, identify yourself." Tessa switched off the radio and crushed it under her boot. No more conversations. She crouched, pulled the sniper's rifle free, and slung it over her shoulder. It was heavier than it looked, good balance, long range. A tool built for someone patient. It suited her now. The sky was shifting above her, gray fading into the first trace of dawn. The kind of dawn that makes smoke look like fog. Her body trembled, exhaustion crawling up her spine, but she couldn't rest yet. She wasn't done. Down the slope, the farmhouse still smoldered. She needed to get there, needed to collect proof, something undeniable, because if she didn't, her death would be rewritten into someone else's report. She started moving, slow but deliberate, using trees as crutches. Every step stabbed her ribs, every breath tasted of copper, but she kept going. Halfway down the ridge, she paused. The forest floor was scattered with shell casings and debris, the battlefield's version of breadcrumbs. And in that chaos, small details stood out. Boot prints, 2 sets, one light, one heavy. Reed. He was still alive. A part of her almost admired that. Most people would have run, but not him. No, Reed wasn't running. He was covering his tracks. The realization settled like a weight in her gut. He wasn't just a contractor. He was the leak, the middleman between the mission and the money. She didn't know what hurt more, her lungs, or the thought that she'd trusted his intel twice. The path ahead narrowed again, leading back toward the farmhouse. Smoke curled up through the broken roof. The air stank of burnt plastic and diesel. As she neared the ruins, a flash of movement made her freeze. Mason. Her brain almost didn't register it at first. The silhouette, the posture, gun drawn, scanning the horizon. "Mason," she called weakly, voice cracking from the smoke. He turned fast, weapon raised, finger on the trigger, and then his eyes widened. "Jesus Christ." Tessa limped closer, rifle lowered. "I told you not to wait for permission." He exhaled sharply, relief and disbelief tangled in his face. "We thought you were." Dead, she finished for him. I know. He moved toward her, his usual composure breaking. You shouldn't be standing, Commander. You took a round through the plate. Missed the heart. He stared at her chest, the cracked armor, the blood-soaked bandages. You sure? She nodded once, positive. Behind him, two surviving SEALs emerged from the tree line, bandaged, limping, faces ash-gray from smoke and fatigue. They froze when they saw her. It wasn't the kind of stare reserved for miracles. It was something quieter, a reverence mixed with guilt. Because every man who saw her breathing was forced to confront what they'd already mourned. Mason moved closer. What happened here? Tessa pulled the comms unit from her pocket, the one she'd taken from the farmhouse before the ambush reignited. It was still smeared with blood. She handed it to him. Listen. He hesitated, then powered it on. The playback was faint but clear, snippets of the enemy's chatter, Reed's voice among them, mentions of staging, deletion, the Balkan files. Mason's expression hardened, so it was an inside job. Contractors, she said, not militia, bought by someone with reach. He looked at her for a long moment. You've got proof. She tapped the device again. This, the sniper's gear and a burned tablet full of root data, encrypted but traceable, that's enough. Mason exhaled. You realize what this means? Yeah, she said quietly. It means the mission wasn't compromised by luck. It was sold. The air between them turned heavy. The kind of silence soldiers understand, when anger runs too deep to waste on words. She adjusted her sling, wincing as pain shot through her shoulder. We need extraction. Already inbound, Mason said. I called for a blackout bird the second we picked up your beacon. She blinked, confusion flashing. Beacon. He gestured to her belt pouch. Failsafe. No one leaves base without it, even you. For a moment, the weight of that simple truth hit her harder than the bullet ever could. She'd been fighting alone all night, thinking she was abandoned. But the signal had been working the entire time, a silent promise in the dirt. Her voice softened. You never told me it auto-triggers after a flatline. Mason gave a ghost of a smile. You never asked. A faint rumble broke through the horizon, rotors slicing the morning fog. The sound grew louder, closer. The black helicopter rose over the ridge, its blades throwing dust in violent spirals. The downdraft hit them like a wave. The SEALs moved into position, weapons raised, scanning perimeters. Mason stayed by her side. When the chopper descended low enough, Tessa turned her head to him. How many made it out? He hesitated. 5. There had been 11. She nodded once. Then we don't waste it. He frowned. Waste what? She met his eyes, the chance to tell the truth. They climbed aboard. The wind roared, the ground falling away beneath them. Inside the cabin, medics rushed forward trying to stabilize her. She waved them off. Later. Mason sat across from her, watching her chest rise unevenly under the cracked vest. You should rest. I will when it's done. Her gaze was distant, fixed on the valley below. The convoy's remains were nothing more than black scars on the road now. She took a slow, careful breath. You ever think about how many times we've done this? Done what? Watched something explode and called it victory. He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Outside, the world turned gold, the first light of morning hitting the ridges. It looked beautiful, peaceful, almost holy. But Tessa knew better. Beauty doesn't erase blood, it just hides it better. The debrief room was cold, fluorescent, impersonal, like everything that waited after war. Hours had passed since extraction. Her wound had been cleaned, her ribs wrapped, her body stabilized. But the quiet inside her hadn't left. 2 intelligence officers sat across from her now, clean uniforms, no dirt, no scars. They asked questions like they were filling blanks on a spreadsheet. Lieutenant Commander, one began. "You're claiming the ambush was premeditated." "Not claiming," she corrected softly. "Confirming." "By whom?" She slid the blood-smeared tablet across the table. "Pull the data. You'll find encrypted comms between the contractors and an unlisted corporate domain." The second officer frowned. "You're saying this wasn't insurgent activity?" She leaned forward slightly. "I'm saying someone sold our position for money." They exchanged looks. One of them scribbled a note. The other asked, "Do you have proof of this Reed individual's involvement?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't have his confession if that's what you want, but I have something better: motive. He was coordinating drone uplinks. Every time his team ran that route, nothing happened, until I showed up with the Balkan files." Silence. Finally, the older officer sighed. "We'll review it." Dismissed. She stood slowly, every muscle stiff. "Don't take too long. People died for that proof." The officer didn't respond, maybe couldn't. As she turned to leave, Mason waited by the door, leaning against the wall. He didn't have to say anything. His eyes said enough. Outside the briefing building, the sun was already high. The base buzzed with morning routine, engines starting, boots clattering, distant laughter that didn't belong to people who'd buried friends the night before. Tessa stepped into the light and felt its warmth on her skin. It should have been comforting. It was. Mason joined her. "You know they'll bury this," he said quietly. She nodded. "Probably." "Then why hand it over?" "Because the truth has to start somewhere." He studied her for a long moment. "You think you'll sleep after this?" She smiled faintly. "Sleep's for people who forget." He looked away. "They're already calling you Iron Heart." "I know. You like it." She shook her head. "It's not a compliment." He almost laughed. "Then what is it?" "It's a warning," she said softly. "Hearts like mine don't stop when they should." They stood there in silence as a convoy rolled out beyond the wire, dust clouds rising in the morning light. Tessa watched them disappear into the horizon, the same kind of road she'd taken yesterday, the same kind of stillness that had felt wrong from the start. And she wondered if somewhere out there, another soldier was feeling that same silence and not listening to it. Because sometimes, survival isn't bravery. It's a curse that keeps you walking long after everyone else has fallen. How do you fight for the truth when the people you fight for would rather you did? The morning after the debrief, the base looked the same: sterile walls, the smell of disinfectant, engines starting somewhere beyond the perimeter fence. But to Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance, it felt smaller, like the air itself was watching. She spent most of the night half awake on a cot in the medical wing, the monitors blinking a slow rhythm beside her bed. Her chest throbbed beneath the compression wrap. Every breath reminded her how close the bullet had come. The medic said she'd been lucky. She didn't feel lucky. When the door opened, she expected Mason. Instead, two men in dark suits stepped in. Intelligence division. Clean shoes, clipped speech. The kind of people who thought danger came with a password. "Commander Vance," the taller one said, "we'll need a few minutes." She sat up slowly, ignoring the pull in her ribs. "You already had hours." "We're following protocol," he replied. "We have questions about your field report." Of course they did. Protocol was just the polite word for disbelief. The shorter agent set a tablet on her lap. On the screen, a transcript of her after-action report red-lined with notes. "Ambush confirmed. Contractors missing. Reed unaccounted for." The agent said, "You claim multiple civilian contractors were responsible for the attack. That's a serious accusation." "So is staging a NATO convoy massacre," she said quietly. He frowned. "We're not disputing your survival, Commander, but we can't verify your recordings. The device you recovered was heavily damaged. Data's corrupted." She met his gaze, steady and cold. "You mean someone scrubbed it?" Neither man answered. "Where's Chief Mason?" she asked. Debriefed separately. Meaning contained. The taller one crossed his arms. There's no evidence linking the ambush to internal leaks. Until we have more, Command is classifying this incident as enemy action. Enemy action, she repeated. That what we call betrayal now. Watch your tone, Commander. She laughed softly, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. My tone kept 8 people alive long enough to be extracted. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the shorter agent gathered the tablet, sliding it back into his briefcase. You're on medical leave effective immediately. No field work, no comms access until further notice. She wanted to argue, but her body reminded her it wasn't finished hurting, so she nodded once. Understood. When they left, the room felt heavier than before. She stared at the closed door, the muffled sound of boots passing in the hallway. They didn't want the truth. They wanted closure, and she was inconvenient. Hours later, Mason found her outside, sitting on a bench near the landing pad. The wind tugged at her bandages through the open collar of her jacket. He stood beside her in silence for a long time before saying, "They're grounding you." "I know. You gonna let them?" Her eyes tracked a convoy rolling out through the main gate, fresh faces heading to someone else's version of routine. You ever notice how every time something goes wrong, the first thing they do is silence the ones who saw it? He said nothing. He didn't need to. She turned toward him. "You still have the backup drive." He hesitated. "You weren't supposed to know about that." "I wasn't supposed to be alive either." A ghost of a smile. Then he handed her a small encrypted data stick. "Copy of everything we pulled from the site before extraction. Coordinates, radio logs, payment ledgers. Some of it's fragmented." She turned it over in her hand. "It's enough." "Enough for what?" "To make sure they can't rewrite it." He looked at her with that weary kind of respect soldiers reserve for lost causes. "You sure you're up for this? You're still half broken." She rose slowly, testing her balance. "Half of me's still better than the whole of them." That night the storm rolled in from the east, thunder low, sky bruised with rain. The base power flickered once, twice, then steadied. Tessa sat at an empty workstation in the Intel bay, the data stick glowing faintly in the terminal. She'd waited until most of the analysts cleared out. The hum of the servers filled the room like distant breathing. File after file unfolded on the screen. Transaction codes, routing paths, shell companies registered under names that meant nothing until one did. Ardent Global Logistics. Her heart slowed. That name had been buried in the Balkan files, the same investigation she'd been running before the ambush. A private contractor group tied to black market arms shipments routed through conflict zones under NATO escort. Reed had been their inside link. She scrolled further. Payment records showed deposits made days before her convoy launched. Large sums, enough to buy silence, enough to buy a war. She copied everything to an encrypted drive and erased the access logs. When she pulled the stick free, her reflection flickered in the monitor, pale face, tired eyes, a faint tremor in her hands. For the first time since the ambush, she felt afraid, not of dying, but of what living demanded next. The rain came harder. She made her way toward the barracks, hood up, moving fast. Every instinct screamed she was being watched, and she was right. Reed stepped out from behind a vehicle near the motor pool, casual as if they'd run into each other at a bar. Same rolled sleeves, same lion tattoo on his forearm. Only this time the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Commander," he said, voice smooth against the rain, "you look alive." "Disappointed." He shrugged. "Depends who you ask." She stopped 2 meters away, weight balanced despite the pain under her ribs. "You sold us out." He tilted his head, almost admiring her composure. "You really think this is about you? You handed over the route. You staged the ambush. You killed 9 men to bury data you didn't understand." He sighed. You still don't get it. The war's not about borders anymore. It's about markets. You either sell the bullets or you get hit by them. You sound proud of that. I sound real, he said. You think Command's clean. They knew. They just needed someone expendable to take the hit when it leaked. The words cut deeper than she expected, because part of her believed him. The rain hissed between them. She said quietly, you had a choice. He smiled, small and cold. So do you. His hand moved first, toward his jacket, the subtle draw of a concealed pistol. But she was faster. The shot echoed once, sharp and final. Reed staggered back, eyes wide, shock more than pain. He looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then back up at her. Guess the heart's still working, she said softly. He collapsed, the rain washing crimson into the mud. For a long moment she just stood there, the pistol hanging loosely in her hand. No adrenaline, no satisfaction, just quiet. When Mason found her minutes later, she was still staring at the body. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. Self-defense, he said finally. She nodded. He drew first. He believed her, or wanted to. They buried the weapon, filed no report. The official story would read, Reed Matheson, civilian contractor, missing presumed dead during hostile activity. Another line in a report no one would read. 2 weeks passed. The investigation wrapped itself in red tape and classification stamps. Command called it a closed case. Insufficient evidence. Tessa attended 9 funerals in 9 days. Each one blurred into the next, folded flags, empty salutes, words about honor that sounded too polished to be real. Every night she replayed the ambush in her head, the laughter over the radio, the feeling of her chest collapsing inward, the silence afterward. Survival wasn't victory, it was punishment. Mason tried to pull her back to normal, PT, shooting range, quiet coffee in the mess hall. But normal didn't exist anymore. One evening he said, you know they'll never clear your name. I don't need them to. Then what do you need? She looked at the horizon, to make sure it never happens again. He studied her, understanding exactly what that meant. You go rogue, they'll come after you. Then they'll find me the same way they found out I wasn't dead, she said. Too late. That night she packed light. A sidearm, a spare mag, a drive with the proof no one wanted, and a single folded letter addressed to Mason. No goodbye, just a line written in her sharp, neat handwriting. Sometimes you don't fight the system, you outlast it. She left the base before dawn, blending into the same mist that once tried to kill her. By the time Command realized she was gone, her trail was already cold. Some said she disappeared into Europe, chasing the shell companies that funded the ambush. Others whispered she joined an intelligence unit off the books, the kind of program that doesn't admit it exists. But the ones who really knew her, Mason among them, understood she wasn't chasing revenge. She was chasing the truth. Months later, in a dim apartment somewhere near Warsaw, an encrypted file landed in the inbox of an investigative journalist. No sender, no trace, just coordinates, payment logs, and a note. For every soldier who died believing orders meant something. The story broke 2 weeks later. Ardent Global's board resigned overnight. The scandal rippled through defense circles like a controlled explosion. Command denied involvement. Contractors vanished. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the world, a woman watched the headlines scroll across a cracked phone screen. Tessa Vance exhaled slowly, the faint ache in her chest still there but quieter now. The scar had healed, the pain had not. She turned off the phone, staring out at the dawn breaking through the city fog. In the reflection of the window, her eyes looked different, softer maybe, or just tired. A thought crossed her mind, one that would linger for years. They shot me through the chest to stop my heart, but the thing they forgot is, hearts like mine don't stop for orders. She slipped the phone into her jacket, pulled the hood up, and disappeared into the waking crowd. No salute, no applause, no closure. Just motion. Because some wars don't end when the shooting stops, they just go quiet. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. What happens when the war follows you home, but home doesn't remember you anymore? The city moved like a restless tide beneath the gray dawn, trams humming, horns echoing, the steady pulse of life that didn't notice ghosts walking among it. Tessa Vance blended into that rhythm easily. No uniform, no insignia, just another stranger in a long coat carrying a scar that the world didn't ask about. Warsaw in winter wasn't kind to anyone, but it was perfect for disappearing. She'd been living under an assumed name for 3 months now, a small apartment on the third floor of a crumbling building near the river, the kind of place where the walls remembered older wars and the neighbors didn't ask questions. She liked that. Questions were dangerous. Her mornings were simple: coffee, painkillers, a stretch routine that hurt like confession, and long walks through the cold air until her ribs stopped reminding her they'd been broken. No one saluted her, no one ordered her anywhere. And yet she couldn't stop listening for the sound of rotors. Every slam of a car door made her flinch. Every shadow that lingered too long in the reflection of a window tightened her jaw. The body heals. The mind keeps its own ledger. She learned to live inside that tension, not fight it, just breathe around it. Most nights she worked from a small desk near the window, light dimmed to half. The encrypted drives Mason had smuggled to her months ago were stacked like quiet allies beside her laptop. She'd already leaked the first set, enough to dismantle Ardent Global and expose its partners. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that was only the outer shell. Behind every shell company was another one. Behind every name, a ghost. The web stretched across borders, languages, uniforms. Some of the emails she decrypted weren't written by businessmen or mercenaries. They were written by people who still wore flags on their shoulders. That was the part that broke her, not the corruption but the familiarity. She served beside men who believed in something cleaner than profit. And now she was staring at evidence that the same institutions she'd bled for were bartering their soldiers like currency. The hardest part wasn't uncovering it. It was deciding what to do with it. She poured another cup of coffee and watched steam drift across the glass. Outside, the river moved slow and dark beneath a skin of ice, a reflection of her pulse, steady but cold. Her phone buzzed once on the table. Unknown number. No message, just a location pin and a time. She stared at it for a moment, then turned the screen face down. She told Mason not to contact her, and he'd kept his word. But this wasn't him. The address was familiar. A quiet cafe on the south side, the kind that served bitter coffee and cheaper secrets. She'd been there before during the Balkan investigation, long before the convoy, back when she still believed in orders. A memory flickered her, sitting at that same cafe, talking to Reed for the first time. That was the day he smiled and said, "Trust is just risk with a nicer name." She hated that he'd been right. By the time she reached the cafe, the sun had barely cleared the rooftops. Snow fell in lazy spirals, mooting the world's edges. The place looked the same: scratched tables, faded walls, the hum of an espresso machine trying its best. She stepped inside, scanning without seeming to. Habit. One exit front, one back through the kitchen, 3 people at tables, one at the counter. Her ribs ached in the cold. She chose the corner booth, back to the wall, eyes on the door. 10 minutes passed. Then a man slid into the seat across from her. Late 50s, lean, trimmed gray hair, a black coat that fit too well to be casual. He smiled slightly. "You're harder to find than the files you leaked." She didn't return the smile. "Then why are you here?" "Because you're making powerful people nervous." "Good," she said. He studied her. You know who I am. No, and if I did, I probably wouldn't care. He chuckled softly. Fair, let's call me a messenger. From who? The people who'd rather this whole story stay buried. She leaned back, arms crossed. You came all this way to threaten me. He shook his head. To warn you, there's a difference. Her expression didn't change. You have 10 seconds before I leave. He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside are coordinates, a name, someone you once saved in Kandahar. He works logistics now and he's next on their list. Her eyes flickered. Why tell me? Because the men who shot you don't care about witnesses. They care about patterns, and you're still one. She didn't touch the envelope. If I wanted to believe you, I'd need more than riddles. He met her gaze evenly. Then you already believe me, otherwise you wouldn't have come. For a moment, neither moved. The cafe noise faded into a low hum behind them. Then he stood, buttoned his coat, and said, You can keep running, Commander, or you can finish what you started. Either way, the truth's coming. Decide which side you want to be on. When he left, the seat across from her still smelled faintly of gun oil. She stared at the envelope for a long time. Then she picked it up, slid it into her pocket, and walked back into the cold. The coordinates led her 200 miles south, across a snow-clogged highway into the edge of Slovakia. The town was small, industrial, built around a rail line that hadn't mattered since the 90s. She found the man easily. Sergeant Pavel Nowak, retired logistics officer, now running a freight yard that shipped civilian goods to unnamed buyers. When she saw him, he was smoking by a warehouse door, shoulders hunched against the cold. Commander Vance, he said when she approached, voice rough but steady, didn't expect you to come. Someone said you might be in trouble. He laughed dryly. Trouble found me years ago, you just didn't notice. She studied him. What do you know? What you already suspect, he said, exhaling smoke. The ambush wasn't the first. It was just the one that went public. These contracts, half legit, half ghost, moving weapons, tech, even personnel through shell routes. Every time a soldier dies in the wrong place, somebody gets paid for it. She felt something sink in her chest, not shock, just confirmation. Why tell me now? He flicked ash into the snow. Because I'm tired of being alive for the wrong reasons. The wind picked up. He handed her a small flash drive. Everything I kept off the books, routes, cargo manifests, encryption keys, it's all there. She pocketed it quietly. You know what happens if they trace this back to you. He smiled faintly. Then maybe they'll stop pretending I don't exist. A gunshot cracked the air before she could answer. The impact spun him backward, smoke and blood blooming in the snow. Pavel, she shouted, dropping to her knees beside him. He tried to speak but couldn't. His eyes met hers for a brief second, full of something that wasn't fear, just regret. Then he was gone. Her head snapped up. The shot had come from the rail yard. She rolled behind a steel container, pulling her pistol free. Another round hissed past her ear, sparking off the metal. She scanned quickly, movement on the far stack. Silhouette, long barrel, suppressor, professional again. Not random, targeted. They'd known she'd come. She crawled low, the snow crunching beneath her knees. Pain screamed through her ribs, but she pushed it down. The rhythm returned. Breath moved aside. She spotted a gap between two freight cars, a line of sight toward the sniper's position. One breath, one chance. She rose just enough to fire. The first shot missed. The second didn't. The figure fell back into shadow. Silence. Her pulse hammered so hard, she thought her ribs might crack again. When she finally approached, the shooter was already dead. Face hidden behind a balaclava. No identification. Just a single symbol stitched onto his vest, a silver emblem shaped like an arrow split in half. She recognized it. It was Ardent Global's mark. It was deeper, cleaner. a private signal used by a black-tier intelligence network known only through rumor, Division 12. They didn't chase money, they chased silence. And they were already chasing her. That night she didn't sleep. She sat in her room with the lights off, the flash drive on the table in front of her, the window fogged with her breath. Outside, the snow fell harder, blanketing the city in quiet. Every path she'd taken since that first ambush led here, to this moment. A chain reaction of choices made in survival's name. She exposed the lie once, but the lie had layers. And each one she peeled back took her further from the world she'd once belonged to. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small trident badge she'd kept since the ambush, the one that had survived the shot. The metal was cracked, edges worn, but it still caught the light. She turned it over in her hand. You don't stop being a soldier when the mission ends. You stop being one when the fight inside you finally goes quiet. Her fight wasn't quiet yet. She placed the trident beside the flash drive, two relics of who she'd been, one forged by duty, the other by betrayal. Then she whispered to herself, almost a prayer. Once you see the truth, you can't go back to orders. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, faint, growing louder. She didn't move. She just sat there in the half-dark, the snow reflecting off the glass like the ghosts of everyone she couldn't save. And somewhere beneath all the pain and exhaustion, she felt it again, that same stubborn heartbeat the bullet couldn't stop. The same reminder that she was still here for a reason. Even if the reason had changed. When you spend your life tracking enemies, you forget how quiet it feels when the enemy starts tracking you. The sirens never reached her street, but the echo did. Tessa Vance sat motionless until it faded, the flash drive still on the table, the cracked trident badge catching the glow from a streetlight outside. Division 12. She'd heard the name once during a NATO exercise, mentioned in whispers, buried under clearance levels so deep they might as well have been myth. Operatives without flags, no accountability. Their job wasn't to fight wars, it was to erase the evidence of them. And now they'd erased Pavel Nowak. She slid the drive into a hollowed-out slot beneath the desk and covered it with a strip of tape. Then she stood, zipped her coat, and checked the magazine in her pistol. 7 rounds, no spare. Enough to survive a night, maybe. Outside, snow fell like static. The street lamps cast long amber cones through the haze, bending the world into slow motion. She started walking east toward the bridge, not running, never running. The first rule of being hunted was rhythm. Predators watch for panic. Her breath fogged the air in front of her. Across the river, freight cranes loomed like skeletons. She crossed halfway before she heard it, the click of footsteps syncing with hers, half a beat behind. She stopped, so did they. Then the city exhaled. A gust of wind, a passing car, the hum of distance. When she turned, the bridge was empty, but instinct screamed otherwise. She pulled the pistol slowly, keeping it low, letting her other hand brush the cold steel railing. "Come on," she whispered. The shot came from behind, suppressed, clean. She dropped flat, the round shattered the railing where her head had been. Sparks danced off the metal. She rolled, fired once, twice into the shadows. A figure darted between lampposts, moving fast, deliberate. Not random, trained. Another agent. She crawled to the bridge's edge and vaulted over the side, landing hard on the frozen riverbank below. Pain lanced through her chest, but she kept moving. The cold burned her lungs. Footsteps followed above, 2 this time. They knew she'd gone down. She moved under the bridge's archway, crouching behind concrete pillars slick with ice. Her breath came ragged. She counted quietly. 1, 2. The first silhouette dropped down 15 meters away, scanning with night vision goggles. The second stayed topside, covering. She aimed carefully, waited for the inhale before the exhale, fired once. The round took him through the lens. He collapsed soundlessly. The other shouted, "Eagle 2, report," then silence as her second bullet found him. When the echoes died, she let herself breathe. Not relief, just calibration. 2 down, how many more? By morning she was in motion again, riding a cargo train west out of the city. The compartment smelled of oil and iron. She sat near the back, hood up, hand resting on her sidearm beneath the coat. Her reflection in the window looked like someone else, a ghost wearing her face. The flash drive burned in her pocket like a heartbeat. Every few hours she checked to make sure it was still there. She thought of Pavel, of Reed, of the convoy burning in the Carpathian Ridge. Every death had become coordinates on a map she couldn't stop reading. Division 12 had cleaned up those trails before, but not this one. She was the unfinished file. And that meant she could write the ending herself. 3 days later, she reached Zurich under another name. Snow turned to rain. The city glowed soft and gold against the lake, too civilized to believe in monsters. She found shelter in an old safe house once used by NATO liaison officers, still off the books, still wired for emergency access. Inside, dust covered everything except the terminal. She powered it up, connected a scrambler to mask the signal, and uploaded fragments of the drive. Names appeared, account chains, procurement codes. And one stood out. V. Kaspar. An old handler. She met him years ago during black site training, officially retired, unofficially probably the hand feeding Division 12. Her pulse quickened. If Kaspar was still active, he'd know she was alive. She opened a secure channel and sent one line. Iron Heart requesting closure. She didn't expect a reply. It came 6 minutes later. Closure granted, Hotel Dreyfus, room 47, midnight, alone. She stared at the screen. It could be a trap. It was a trap. But sometimes traps were just the fastest way to find the truth. Hotel Dreyfus sat on the edge of the old district. Quiet, respectable, the kind of place where secrets ordered room service. At 00:03, she stepped inside. The lobby was empty except for a night clerk who didn't look up from his newspaper. The elevator hummed softly, 4th floor, room 47. The door was unlocked. She entered slowly, pistol drawn, back against the wall. Inside, warm lamplight, the smell of tobacco, 2 glasses on the table, and a man sitting in the armchair, older, heavier but unmistakable. Kaspar. He looked up, smiled faintly. You always did hate surprises. Depends who's giving them. He gestured to the other glass. You came armed, good. That means you're still thinking clearly. She stayed standing. Division 12 sent you. He chuckled. Division 12 is me in part, or was. Bureaucracy has a way of renaming its sins. Then you know what they did. I know exactly what they did, and I know why. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You were digging into something no one asked for, money trails, weapons routes. You found rot we can't afford to bleach in public, so we did what we always do. Kill the messenger. He nodded. Containment, not cruelty. We serve stability. The world runs smoother when truth arrives slowly. She stared at him. You call that stability, you call murder restraint. Kaspar's eyes softened. You think I enjoy it. You think I don't remember every name. You want accountability, Commander, but accountability doesn't keep the world from burning. It just makes better fuel. She lowered the gun slightly, not from trust but from fatigue. Pavel Noak's dead because of you. My team's dead because of you. And you're alive because of me, he said quietly. I made the call to leave your body untouched that night. I wanted to see if the legend could live up to itself. Her chest tightened. You tested me. I needed to know if the heart everyone talked about was real. It was, and now you're proof. Proof that even after betrayal, a soldier still follows the mission. She stepped closer, the muzzle hovering near his throat. And what's my mission now? To choose, he said. Join us. Work within the system. Clean the rot from inside, or keep bleeding in the dark until someone better replaces you. The words hung heavy between them. For a second, she almost believed him. Then she saw it, the faint tremor in his hand reaching for the side drawer. She fired once. The shot echoed through the room, muffled by carpet and distance. Caspar slumped sideways, eyes wide, surprise frozen on his face. In the drawer, another pistol, silenced, still warm. She holstered hers, leaned down and whispered, "You shouldn't test hearts you don't understand." Then she took his keycard, his phone, and the folder on the desk marked D12, continuity. By dawn, the body was gone, the room wiped clean, the folder's contents scattered across encrypted servers in 6 countries. Inside were directives, kill orders, cover operations, internal memos linking Division 12 to multiple covert assassinations. She uploaded everything. Not to the press this time, to the soldiers. Hundreds of private inboxes within NATO's network received fragments, enough to make them question, enough to plant doubt where obedience used to live. When the system starts questioning itself, no amount of deletion can stop the bleed. She sat in the safe house hours later, watching the feeds explode online. Anonymous leaks, unverified sources, denials, then confirmations. The world was catching up to what she'd already lived. And she felt nothing. No triumph, no peace, just the same quiet heartbeat she'd been following since that farmhouse. That evening, Mason called. She almost didn't answer. The line crackled. "You did it, didn't you?" "I did something." "They're calling it the biggest intel breach in NATO history." "They're calling it justice," she said. "Justice?" he echoed. "You think truth without control doesn't kill people too?" She closed her eyes. "Maybe, but at least this time they'll know what killed them." Silence, then his voice softened. "They'll come for you again." "I know. You could come back, we could protect you." She almost smiled. "You can't protect me from the truth, Mason. You never could." He exhaled. "Then what now?" "I keep moving." "Where?" "Where the silence still sounds wrong." The line went dead. She left Zurich that night, crossing into Italy under heavy rain. The train was half empty. She sat by the window, watching her reflection flicker against tunnels and lightning. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and gold. Somewhere between stations, she opened her notebook, hand-drawn maps, half-written thoughts, fragments of memory. At the bottom of one page she wrote, "When truth costs everything, what's left to save?" She stared at the words for a long time before closing it. Sleep came in fragments, dreams of smoke and laughter, of Reed calling the ambush confirmation. She woke gasping, hand already gripping the pistol beneath her jacket. Just reflex, always reflex. The conductor passed through the aisle, nodding politely. She returned the gesture, forcing her pulse to slow. When the train emerged from the tunnel, dawn broke across the Alps. For the first time in months, she let herself look at it, not as a soldier but as someone simply breathing. The light hit the snow peaks like forgiveness. Maybe this was what survival really meant. Not victory, not vengeance, just the ability to watch a sunrise without expecting gunfire. She leaned her head against the cold glass and whispered, "You tried to stop my heart, but all you did was teach it how to keep going." The rhythm returned, steady, patient, unbreakable. Somewhere ahead, another story was already forming, another silence waiting to be broken. And Tessa Vance, the woman they'd tried to erase, was still moving toward it. You can run from a country. You can't run from a consequence. The sun was still rising when Tessa Vance reached the Italian coast. The air smelled of diesel and salt. Fishing boats swayed in the harbor like they were waiting for someone who never came back. She changed her name again, new passport, new haircut, a different shade of silence. but the look in her eyes was the same. Behind every alias, there's only ever one person left to remember the truth. She rented a small flat above a mechanic's shop in Genoa. Concrete walls, rusted balcony, sea wind cutting through the shutters. It was enough. She told herself it would be temporary. She'd been telling herself that for years. At night, she watched ships drift across the dark water, their navigation lights flickering like lost souls. Somewhere out there, cargo moved that still bore the fingerprints of the same ghosts she'd been fighting. Division 12 wasn't gone. It was just sleeping, the kind of sleep that waits for permission to wake. She could feel them stirring again. 3 nights later, she was proven right. It started small, a reflection in a window that didn't match the angle, a shadow that waited too long before moving. Then came the signal, a single message on her burner phone. The unfinished file isn't yours to keep. No number, no trace, just that line. She deleted it, but it didn't matter. Messages like that weren't meant to warn. They were meant to remind. She packed her essentials, weapon, cash, the encrypted drive, and went aground again. But this time, they didn't wait for her to vanish. At 02:17, the first explosion shattered the street below. The blast blew the shop windows out, glass spraying like rain. She hit the floor before the second detonation hit. Fire climbed up the building's front like a hungry wave. Tessa crawled to the balcony, vaulted over the railing, and dropped into the alley below. The impact rattled her ribs, but she kept moving. Behind her, the apartment roared into flame. A voice crackled through her earpiece, one she hadn't heard since Zurich. "Mason to Iron Heart, you alive?" She froze, pressing the transmitter. "How the hell did you find this channel? You didn't think I'd stop tracking you, did you? I told you to stay out of it." "Yeah, you did," he said, "and you didn't listen when I told you they'd come back." Her jaw tightened. "How bad?" "Bad enough that half the brass is pretending you never existed. Division 12's cleaning house. You're at the top of their list." "Good," she muttered. "Means I'm still a problem." "Where are you?" "Alive, that's all that matters." "Tessa, listen." But she cut the line. She couldn't afford connection. Connection was liability. She moved through the industrial outskirts before dawn, her coat torn, blood running down her sleeve from a shard of glass. The harbor was already alive, cranes groaning, workers shouting in 3 different languages, gulls screaming overhead. Somewhere in that noise, she found cover. A storage container near Dock 12, half-locked, forgotten. She crawled inside and sat in the dark, breathing through the pain. The air smelled of oil and salt. Her heart pounded, steady and defiant. She pulled the drive from her pocket, still intact, scorched but unbroken. It felt heavier now, like it knew what it cost to exist. She whispered to it, almost laughing, "You're the last piece of proof left in a world that forgot how to care." Outside, engines rumbled. She peeked through the gap, 2 black SUVs parked near the pier. Men stepped out, coordinated, no insignia. Division 12. She counted 5, then 6, then one more, the one who didn't move like the others, slower, deliberate, watching. Her stomach dropped. She recognized that gait. Mason. For a moment she thought she was wrong, that maybe it was someone who just looked like him. But when he turned slightly toward the light, she saw it, the same scar at the edge of his jaw, the same way his hand brushed the holster like a second heartbeat. She exhaled through her teeth. "No," she whispered, "not you." He said something to the others, too quiet to hear, and pointed toward the warehouses. Her mind spun, was he with them, or infiltrating them? She wanted to believe the latter, but belief was a luxury she'd buried months ago. She waited until they split up, pairs moving down separate aisles. Mason stayed with one. When they passed her container, she moved. Out the back, silent as she could. Pain flared through her chest, but adrenaline smothered it. She stayed low, ducking between crates and forklifts, sliding along the slick ground until she reached the far end of the dock. There, an old maintenance tug sat idle, its lights off. She climbed aboard, found a wrench, and forced the ignition open. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught. Shouts followed instantly. She slammed the throttle forward. The tug lurched into motion, slamming through the waves. Bullets cracked across the water, each one closer than the last. She ducked behind the console, firing back blindly. Sparks erupted off the railing. One round tore through her shoulder. She bit down hard, refusing to scream. Ahead, the open sea stretched into gray. She pushed harder. The tug groaned, metal shuddering under pressure. Behind her, Mason's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "Tessa, stop, it's me." She froze. The sound shouldn't have shaken her, but it did. He was shouting again. "You're running into a trap. You're heading straight for their blockade." She looked at the horizon, faint lights flickering ahead, fast-moving vessels. Damn it! She yanked the wheel hard, veering toward the rocks along the southern ridge. The tug scraped, metal shrieking. A flare lit up the sky, Division 12 signaling pursuit. She fired one last burst at their lead vehicle, then dove from the deck just before the tug slammed into the rocks. The explosion sent her spinning beneath the surface, ears ringing, lungs burning. When she surfaced, debris rained down around her like dying stars. The water stung her wounds, freezing cold. She swam for the shadows of the cliffside, dragging herself up onto the stones. The world blurred, every breath a war of its own. She crawled until her fingers hit solid ground. Then she stopped moving altogether. When she woke, it was morning. The tide had retreated, so had the pain, dulled by shock and exhaustion. Her vision cleared slowly, cliffs behind her, endless sea ahead. She was alive again, somehow. She laughed once, bitter and breathless. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" A voice answered from behind her. "I could say the same about you." She turned. Mason stood a few meters away, soaked, limping slightly, pistol in hand. They stared at each other in the cold morning light, two ghosts who'd run out of excuses. "You with them now?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "I was trying to stop them, but you do exactly make that easy. You brought them here. I followed the signal from your drive. They already had a lock. I tried to intercept." She studied his eyes, looking for deceit. Found none, only the same exhaustion she carried. "Then why are you still holding that gun?" "Because I don't know which side you're on anymore," he said. "You leaked classified intel. You killed Caspar. You made enemies of every shadow agency in the hemisphere. They made me first." He stepped closer. "You think this ends with truth. It ends with bodies. Yours, mine, whoever's nearest when the story stops being useful. Then maybe the story needs to end differently." He sighed. "You can't fix the world by burning it down." She met his eyes. "I'm not burning it, I'm unmasking it." Silence stretched between them, the kind of silence that could break or heal. Then distant engines echoed again. Division 12 wasn't done. Mason looked toward the sound, then back at her. "They won't stop, you know." "I know. So what's the plan?" She glanced at the horizon, then back at him. "You still remember the coordinates from the Balkan operation?" He nodded slowly. "That ridge has an underground relay still tied to NATO's main grid. If we reach it first, we broadcast everything. Every file, every directive, every name. And then we disappear for good." He hesitated, then holstered his weapon. "You're insane." She smiled faintly. "I learned from the best." By sunset, they were on the road again, an unmarked van heading east through the Italian countryside. Snow fell in slow drifts over the windshield, blurring the lines between past and present. Mason drove. She sat beside him, pale and quiet, one hand pressed to her bandaged shoulder. For the first time in months, They didn't need to fill the silence. It filled itself. After a while, Mason said, "You ever regret it?" "What?" "Coming back, surviving." She stared out the window. "Every day, but regret's just proof you're still human." He nodded. "You still think we can win this?" She looked ahead, endless road, endless unknown. Winning stopped being the point. Now it's about remembering why we fought it all. He smiled faintly. "And what was that?" She turned to him, eyes steady. "So the ones who never came back don't get erased." The road curved, headlights cutting through the snow. Behind them, the horizon burned faintly orange, the glow of something chasing them still. And somewhere beyond that, the truth waited, raw, dangerous, unfinished. The kind of truth worth dying for, or finally living through. Sometimes endings don't wait for peace, they wait for courage. The mountains rose like shadows against the sky as Tessa Vance and Mason Hale crossed the last stretch of the ridge road. The storm had followed them for hours, sleet turning to snow, snow turning to silence. In the distance, the old NATO relay bunker sat half-buried in ice, its antennas broken, rusted, forgotten by everyone except the people who still carried ghosts in their chest. She'd chosen this place for a reason. The first and last mission she'd ever led had passed through this valley. It was where everything started and, she decided, where everything would end. Mason parked the van under the cliff face, engine idling. The wind howled through the open doors. "You sure it's still active?" he asked. "Power grid's dead," she said, pulling her hood tight. "But the uplink's satellite-linked. All we need is a heartbeat." He smirked faintly. "Yours seems to have 9 lives. Let's hope it's got one more." They stepped out into the cold. The snow crunched under their boots, the sound swallowed by the storm. Inside the bunker, everything smelled of iron and dust. Old wires dangled like veins from the ceiling. The walls were scarred with the ghosts of old command symbols. Tessa brushed frost from a control panel. "It's still intact," she murmured. "We can route the signal through the secondary uplink." Mason moved beside her, connecting the portable drive she'd been protecting since Genoa. "Once this goes live, there's no undoing it. Every secret, every operation. It'll burn them all." "Then let it burn," she said quietly. "Maybe from the ashes something cleaner grows." He paused, then nodded. "You always did believe in redemption." She looked at him. "No, I just stopped believing in silence." They worked in near darkness, guided by the flicker of old monitors. Static hissed through the air like distant breath. Her fingers moved automatically, remembering protocols she'd sworn she'd never use again. Outside, thunder rolled through the valley, the kind that doesn't come from weather. "Engines." Mason froze. "We've got company." She looked at the monitor, thermal readings lighting up the screen. 6 signatures, maybe 7, closing fast. Division 12 had found them again. "Time?" she asked. 2 minutes until uplink's stable. Then we hold for 2 minutes. He gave a dry laugh, always the optimist. "No," she said, checking her pistol, "just stubborn." The first shots came through the doorway, suppressed, precise, surgical. Sparks burst from the walls. Mason ducked behind a terminal, returning fire. Tessa moved to the flank, covering the side entrance. Her shoulder screamed, but her aim stayed steady. 2 agents pushed in, black suits, visors, formation tight. She dropped the first with a clean headshot, the second with a burst to the chest. 30 seconds, Mason shouted over the gunfire. She reloaded, breathing through the pain. Every inhale felt like glass. Another explosion shook the floor, the outer gate breaching. She fired toward the tunnel, emptying the mag. Smoke and echoes filled the air. 10 seconds. "Do it," she shouted. He slammed the final command. "Uplink engaged, signal transmitting." The monitor flared to life, data streams, coordinates, encrypted packets flowing like veins of light. Tessa's drive was alive, feeding into the satellite above. Division 12 secrets, years of black ops, assassinations, manipulation, spilling into the open world. Every soldier who died under false orders now had a name behind their silence. The truth was out. Then the power cut. The bunker went dark. For a heartbeat, only the storm existed. Then emergency lights flickered red, bathing everything in a crimson glow. Mason checked the screen. Transmissions halfway done. Backup generators dead. If they hit the uplink, it dies with it. Tessa stared toward the tunnel, where muffled footsteps echoed closer. They'll aim for the dish. He nodded, then we stopped them. They moved through the corridor, smoke still lingering. Mason covered the left flank. She took the right. The wind howled through a crack in the ceiling, mixing with the sound of boots. Two figures advanced through the mist. They wore Division 12 insignia, silver arrows, clean and bright. Tessa waited until they were close. Then she stood. Her first shot took one through the visor. The second dropped the other before he could aim. The recoil jolted her ribs, forcing a cry from her throat she couldn't hold back. Mason caught her arm, steadying her. "You're hit again." She glanced down, blood seeping through her coat. "Not enough to matter. Still pretending you're invincible. Still pretending you can save me." They shared a look, part grief, part gratitude. "Go," she said. "Protect the uplink." He hesitated. "I'm not leaving you." "That's not an order, Mason. That's a request." He knew better than to argue. He squeezed her hand once, hard, then turned toward the relay chamber. She faced the tunnel alone. The next wave came hard, grenades first, light blinding, sound drowning thought. She dropped to the ground, rolled behind a broken generator, returned fire through the haze. 3 more fell. One made it close enough to grab her arm. She slammed her elbow into his throat and pulled the trigger under his chin. Blood sprayed across the metal. Her pistol clicked empty. She grabbed the agent's weapon, turned, fired again. The sound became distant, like she was underwater, every breath shorter than the last. She'd lost too much blood. But she stayed standing. The door behind her burst open, Mason stumbling back, smoke rising from the relay room. "They've got explosives," he shouted. "How long?" 30 seconds before detonation. Transmission. He looked at the screen, blinking green, still uploading. Almost there. She grabbed his vest. "Go, get out." "I'm not." "Go," she roared, the word tearing her throat raw. "If one of us stays, it finishes. That's all that matters." He stared at her, understanding written all over his face. Then he nodded once. He ran. She turned back to the console, blood dripping onto the keys. The screen flickered, upload complete, signal transferred. She exhaled softly, almost smiling. "You made it." The detonation ripped through the base a second later. They found her 12 hours later. Rescue teams combing the wreckage reported one survivor, Mason Hale, barely conscious, suffering hypothermia and fractures. He asked them to look for another. They never found her. At least not officially. The uplink logs confirmed the full transmission reached orbit. Within hours, the data hit public servers. Division 12's existence was no longer rumor. Governments denied it, then investigations began, then resignations followed. The world trembled quietly, power rearranged itself. And in that tremor, somewhere between guilt and glory, a name returned: Tessa Vance. Weeks later, Mason stood on a cliff overlooking the Adriatic. Snow had melted into cold rain. He held her trident badge in his hand, the one she'd carried since the ambush. It was scorched now, cracked down the middle. He spoke softly, as if she could hear through the wind. "You wanted them to remember. Well, they will." He closed his fist around the metal. Somewhere below, waves struck the rocks with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Months passed. In a small fishing village north of the Aegean, a woman rented a room under another name. She walked with a slight limp, wore gloves even in the heat, and never stayed anywhere long. Locals called her the Quiet One. She spent her days by the docks, sketching ships on scraps of paper, her eyes always somewhere far away. At night she listened to the radio. Sometimes she heard her own ghost in the news, leaked files, trials, the slow reconstruction of everything she'd set in motion. Each time she smiled faintly, not pride, not regret, just peace. Because maybe justice wasn't about punishment, maybe it was about memory. And memory, once freed, doesn't die. One evening, as the sun bled orange into the sea, she stood on the pier, watching the waves. The wind carried voices, laughter, static, echoes from lives she'd left behind. For a moment she saw them all: Reed, Pavel, the convoy team, Mason's tired smile. Not as ghosts, as reminders. She whispered, "We finished what we started." Then she dropped the trident badge into the water. It sank slow, catching one last glint of light before vanishing. The ocean took it, and she let it. Voice over tone, soft and measured. They said the heart was just a muscle that, when it breaks, it never beats the same. Maybe they're right, but some hearts don't break, they transform. They shot her in the chest to stop the mission. Instead, they created one that never ends. Because sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse to be silent. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.